it's quite a complex thing for our non-Muslim listeners, but I suppose you can see then the richness of the Islamic tradition, that it is able to critique itself. I think what has happened is that hadith is now being used and misused often by people who don't really understand the type of knowledge, the type of knowledge material it is, and what you need are kind of quite advanced skills to be able to understand the hadith literature and to then talk about its authenticity. But it is true to say that in this long journey over the last 1400 years, a lot of the law, the substantive law that we see in Islam actually does rely on hadith materials. And that's to do with a certain shift. It's a methodological preference. But it is something that is being critiqued by scholars who are now called reformists. I mean, when I always say this, when I use the word reform, I do not use it in the Eurocentric Christian sense of reformation of the church. Not at all. When I'm talking about reform, I'm talking more about scholars critiquing some of these methodological decisions that our early scholars took and thinking about going back to sources. So one of the things that's come out now is that apart from the textual sources, the really reliable method of transmission of the Islamic way of life is the sunnah, or the normative praxis of the Prophet. It's how we live as Muslims. So you would have seen, Chris, things like Muslims will say Assalamu alaikum, or they would say Bismillah, in the name of Allah before they start a task or they start eating. This is the normative praxis of the Prophet. And this is actually, in the early days of Islam, was considered to be a more reliable source of Islamic knowledge than hadith, because hadith came later. So I know it's quite a complex thing for our non-Muslim listeners, but I suppose you can see then the richness of the Islamic tradition, that it is able to critique itself. It is able to ask these questions. I think the unfortunate thing is that often, because Muslims have been in very, very difficult circumstances the last 150 odd years or so, since the formation of the nation state, since the advent of colonialism, and particularly the damage to Muslim identity and its institutions that was done by colonial powers. So we're very, how do I put it? It's almost like we become a bit unmoored, like we're a ship sailing a raging sea, and we can't really navigate ourselves. We can't find the stars that would help us navigate in the right direction. So we feel that way. We're floating in a very stormy sea. But the knowledge tradition of Islam is actually able to critique itself. And I think some people like myself who are working in that reformist space are trying to bring that vibrancy back and say, yes, we are able to step back. We are able to critique. We are able to create new knowledge. We don't have to say the same things and be regurgitative, say the same things the scholars have been saying for 1,000 years. We can actually say new things. But it continues to be a very contentious area, and you do get a lot of aggressive reaction to that. But I think, as with any knowledge tradition, that would happen.